Normally I start out with a little story about something, but I just got to say, when I read the first reading, the only thing that came to mind to me was wow. Because this was a prophecy, right? This is from the book of Wisdom. It was written long before Jesus ever came about, but it was a prophecy about how he would be treated. It said that because he went against what the Pharisees and all had done, they were considering him to be obnoxious. Because he came and told the truth, and it wasn't the truth that the people wanted to hear, that they were going to kill him. Can you think of anybody in the world today that faces that same type of persecution? Look at Pope Francis, for instance. Since Pope Francis took office, and he's been considered to be controversial. But part of the reason why he's so controversial is because the media doesn't understand what he's saying. There are so many people that don't understand him when he speaks. They don't understand our faith. They don't understand Catholicism as a whole. And I give you, for instance, when Pope Francis came out and said that we need to be kind to homosexuals, all of a sudden the headline said, the Pope is changing the teachings of the church on homosexuality. No, he's not. No, what he was telling us is that we have to be kind and loving people. And it doesn't matter who it is that we're being kind and loving to. We need to be kind and loving to everyone. That's what he was saying. You see, I was always taught that the church said to love the sinner but hate the sin. So he was just saying that to help the homosexuals to realize that they wasn't the enemy. But everybody took it all out of context because it goes against what we were taught, right? He was considered to be obnoxious. And even further back, when Pope Benedict was in office, he made a statement because of the wars in the Middle East. He said that we cannot use religion to kill people. Doesn't that sound true? Doesn't that sound like the truth? Well, he wasn't doing anything but speaking the truth. And some talking head in Europe said, who does the Pope think he is? We should execute him. Really? Listen to what people say. Look at the persecution of the people that come out and tell the truth or stand up for the truth. Look into our own lives, right? In our own little worlds, not the world as a large, but in our own little worlds. Do you work with somebody who is always trying to stand up for what's right? Those people don't get invited to different things because they're always going to stand up and they're always going to be there for the lower guy. They're always going to try to be the champion to help someone else. And sometimes that goes against the culture. Sometimes that goes against the way we are supposed to be doing things because it's not what we were taught. But you see, we have to understand as Catholic Christians that our faith, that Catholicism in itself is countercultural. You see, what we're taught in our church is that what society says, right? Society tells us that you have to be number one. You have to work on your self-esteem and you have to be number one. Number one, number one, number one. Don't let anybody get ahead of you. But what does Jesus tell us in the gospel today? Jesus says that if you want to be first, you have to make yourself last. And if you want to be served, you have to be the servant of all. And he not only said it, he did it. You see, Jesus calls us to put other people ahead of ourselves. So you see, the secret to life is that what we used to think was a word, right? Joy. But joy is actually an acronym, right? It stands for Jesus, others, and then yourself. You see, we have to put Jesus first in our lives every day. Every day, Jesus needs to be first in our lives. And if we're not communicating, if we're not praying, if we're not having a conversation with Jesus every day, and we say that he is first in our lives, then we are liars. Because he has to be first. Jesus isn't somebody that you have time for. It's somebody that you take time for and make time for. We have to make time to pray every day. And y'all all know my favorite phrase, right? But we have to have that conversation with him every day, or he's not the Lord of our life. And then we have to put others ahead of ourselves. You see, we have to make sure that we take care of those people who are in need. Those people who have less than us, we have to make sure that we're taking care of. We have to be people of charity. And that's what he is calling us to do. And what is charity? See, charity has a bunch of different faces, right? Because some people say, well, I can't do a whole lot. But if someone asks you to pray for them, then take some time and pray for them. Because what you've done is that you've taken time away from yourself and given it to someone else. You see, it's that simple. But sometimes we're so busy worrying about ourselves, worrying about me getting the things that I want, that we forget about the others, or we just don't see them. So, I'm going to give you some homework. Don't make a face. It's real simple. When you get home tonight, I want you to take a small piece of paper, or a big one if you need it. It depends on the need, okay? But I want you to take a small piece of paper, and I want you to write 3 words on it. What I want you to write on that piece of paper is, I am third. And then you take that piece of paper and you tape it to the mirror in your bathroom. Because most people, the second thing we do every morning is look in the mirror. Okay, and if we look in the mirror, and before I can see this person who's going to be really hard to see Jesus because I just got up, and I read those words, I am third, I am on a good path to start out my day. Because it's going to remind us that we need to put Jesus first. And it's going to remind us that when we get out into the world, we have to put others ahead of ourselves. And you see, that's the way we're going to receive that joy of being disciples of Jesus Christ. It's very simple. Sounds simple, isn't it? So if we want to receive that joy, that's what we have to do. Jesus, others, and then yourself. You see, Jesus first, always. Then we put others ahead of ourselves. We make sure we take care of the people that need to be taken care of. And then we have to care for ourselves, right? Because in the Gospels, Jesus also tells us to love your neighbor as yourself. And if we're not taking care of ourselves, how can we love our neighbor? So we have to make sure that we say those prayers for ourselves also. And we do the things we need to do for ourselves. But always keeping in mind that we put others first. And that little note's going to help us on the path first thing in the morning. And you see, James, in the second reading, he spoke about the community that he was in, right? He was talking about this community, and there was jealousy and envy and ambition and all kind of stuff like this going on. And it was people jockeying back and forth for a position. But you know what? If we reach that joy, if we become those disciples, all of that disappears, you see, because I can't imagine that being in our community. Because if we become those people, those disciples of love that Jesus Christ calls us to be, we're going to begin to change the world. That's right. Right here in this little community of St. Mary's in Raceland, Louisiana, we can begin to change the world if only we live the faith that we profess. If only we can stand up and be countercultural, if we can stand up for the faith that we believe, the faith that we are taught, and really listen to the leaders, listen to the Pope, and understand what he says, and help him to guide our lives. Help us to know that what goes on out in the world that makes us uncomfortable is probably wrong, because it's not what we're taught. But to stand up and defend that faith that we have, that faith that is given to us by Jesus Christ, by receiving that joy. Last weekend I was on retreat, and the retreat master gave us a quote from Mother Teresa. And it reminded me of the movie, The Passion of the Christ. And I know most of us have seen that movie. Well, in the scene that what Mother Teresa's quote reminded me of is when they got to Calvary. and Simon and they dropped the cross on the ground, and Jesus fell next to the cross. And that scene, it reminded me, because Jesus didn't crawl away from it, he crawled to it. He went to the cross because he put us ahead of himself. And Mother Teresa's quote was, Jesus showed us how much he loved us by accepting his cross. And today, he shows us how much he still loves us in the Eucharist, because he still pours himself out to us. And if the Master and the Savior humbled himself enough to do what he did for us to be his disciples, how much should we do for others?